and I'm here to talk to you about my iOS application for CSE 355. It is an iOS task management application. So the idea I actually got from my grandfather. He owns a metal manufacturing business and has been in the business for over 20 years. My grandfather is very traditional, so growing up, every time I would see him using his workflow, I would always see him having uh, leather bounds of books, sticky notes, and napkins that he would just frantically write random notes for the business or whatever came to his mind. And a problem I saw with that at the time and over time as I matured is that pen and paper offered limitations to what he was trying to do. So if he would write sticky notes for, say, a coworker, he would sometimes draw a quick sticky note, put it maybe on the monitor, and leave it for the next day. But sometimes the sticky notes would fall, or sometimes with mix of papers or moving things around, things would just get lost and the message would never get across. That was one limitation with pen and paper that I saw, and because of the sticky notes not adhering to the material wherever he would place it, they became ineffective. And eventually, this led to routines being less likely to be maintained because of everything that he was doing. My grandfather is a very traditional man, so what I saw was he needed a solution that was seamless to use, something he didn't have to necessarily think about. But it also at the same time had to be simplistic, where if I were to show him for the very first time, him or anybody for that matter, they would just instantly understand how to use the application. Uh, Another great thing about this idea that I has is what if it would be really cool to offer some sort of like report card or offer a message to kind of motivate the user to continue doing more and more tasks and completing those tasks as a form of motivation. This is where my app idea kind of stemmed from, helping my grandfather and those in need to create a simple application where it is easy to make a task and effortlessly to maintain and stick to those tasks. So this is the class diagram. I wanted to keep it very simplistic in a way where everything would flow from one screen to another. Essentially, you have a view controller, which is going to be the main page, and that view controller stems from two separate toggle bars at the bottom menu. But the primary view controller that's going to greet the user when the application starts is a table view. This table view is intended to showcase all the current tasks that need to be performed. And it's really great because every time the user boots the app, they get a color priority based on the priority of the task. So essentially they see a task name and they see a color representing, to kind of give a more simplistic look and a subtle look of what needs to be performed quickly and in the moment. Another great thing about the view controller is that it has a personalized message depending on when the user opens the application and according to what time of day. The message will change, and they even have the option to kind of get their weather forecast of that day so that basically they could plan accordingly on what they need. Then basically there is an add view controller, which is going to be where the user would add the task information. This is where we will get basic SwiftUI forms to complete task logging. We can get the task name, we can get the priority, the group or category that they would like to put this note in to kind of help organize themselves, a completion date of when they want to see this task be performed and completed, and a notes area. The add tasks has the ability for the user to select an image so that if they need something to remember or something that kind of help add more substance to their task, they can take an image and select it. And of course, location information could be added if they need to be specified at a specific location. This will prompt the map view controller, which I wanted to have segregated from the add task due to the different MapKit framework and dependencies that are needed to perform location search. But the way MapKit is going to be utilized in my application is that it is intended to have it so that you can quickly and effortlessly look up a location without having to look up any sort of details immediately. So you could look up, say, your local Starbucks, or say a coffee shop, a pizza shop, anything for that matter. You just type in the query and it will prompt you with the nearest location. So you can effortlessly go there without having to think of an address or search anything up. Again, the idea of this application was to keep it very simplistic, easy to maintain, but have substance to what you add. So that way you are adding as much information as needed, but creating the task simply as simple as possible, essentially. And then once all these information are added, the user can view it in a details view, where he gets a clean interface presenting all the information at once. From here, the user has certain actions to either dismiss or complete the task. And once it's done so, it's really neat. The table will automatically be refreshed in the background. So when the user goes back to the table view, which is in your view controller, the task will no longer be in the table view. But it does get logged in your report card, the report card viewer. This is kind of like your motivational report card to showcase how often you are completing tasks and how often you are not completing your tasks. The idea behind this functionality was to kind of give you motivation to showcase if you're very committed to your tasks that you create or if you're not. That's pretty much the class diagram, the overall idea that I have with it. Another great thing that's able to be noted about the report card is that we are using core data for this application, and we are using separate entities to keep track of the overall data flow. Right here is the model view controller architecture to showcase the overall functionality of the application for how the user is going to interact. In our controller, we have background data such as our API fetches for the weather, fetching the entities for core data. We could retrieve tasks from core data, and we can send information to our core data, which is our model. And our model will showcase all the important fields that need to be interacted with that we showed in the last class diagram, such as the task, completion date, group, notes, everything that's like that. The model view controller aspect of this is really great. It helped me segregate all my business logic, and it allowed me to kind of basically control the flow of how I want my application to be interacted with what the user sees and how that correlates to the back end. And that's something that you see in the view. So the view contains all the basic interactions that I intended the application to present to the user, such as toggles, UI image picker views, dynamic messaging, mapped of search models or searched images, search items, and UI alert actions. So this is the capabilities of the application. I want to keep it very clean, very simplistic. It's very nice because the user gets presented with this task list view, which is in our view controller. And it's great because you get a different message every time. You get a different message in a different image depending on the time of day that you check, which is really, really great. I feel like it adds personality to the application, and it adds kind of more of like a liveliness that kind of correlates with your day depending on where you're at in the day. I even have it so that the user can pretty much get the weather forecast in the moment. So if they hit the Get Weather button, it will tell them what the day is going to be like so they can kind of plan accordingly. So when they click on the plus button, they're going to get presented with this Add Task view. Very simplistic, very clean, very minimal. I wanted the user to, again, kind of understand how the application works based on what's presented in front of them. So from there, they can add the task name, they could set the priority level of the application, and what's neat about the priority level is that there's a color indicator on each priority that's going to get associated with the task. Low being green, medium being blue, and high being red. They can assign the category and group that they want this task to be associated with. So in this case, for my grandfather, if he needs to purchase gloves, we'll use this as an example for his manufacturing business. Let's say he needs to purchase gloves, he can put this as his work category. So he could segregate his work life, his work responsibilities with his personal. The user can then select a completion date of when they want to see this task be completed. They could add any important notes. So in this case, my grandfather could add a message of he needs to purchase gloves for his employees so that maybe they're running low one day and he just needs to add this as a quick task. Let's say he has a specific pair of gloves that he was told by his employees that they prefer. He could actually add an image of the particular gloves that he may have been looking at, or the particular gloves that he may have been told to get, and he could add that to the task as well, so that way he knows exactly what he needs to purchase. He could even toggle this button down at the bottom, this UI switch, and this will allow him to add a location to which he needs to purchase the gloves. So let's say he knows he's going to go to his nearest Home Depot. He could just simply type in the location name, and the app will intuitively find the nearest location that's on his route to work, so that he could just simply add it to his task list and have it be associated. So now that the task has been added, the table will automatically refresh in the background as such, and he will get presented with the task name and the priority color. When he clicks on this task name, he will have the option to get an overview of basically all the details that he associated with the task. And from here, he can either complete or dismiss a task. So doing so, there is a log using core data that will keep track of how many tasks he completes throughout the day and how many tasks he does not complete throughout the day. So here we're going to show a live demo just to kind of demonstrate it. Here you're simply getting the weather. It gets presented to the user. From here you can then complete the task or add the task and add all the specific fields needed as such. So in this case, my grandfather would need to purchase gloves. He can then add any images that he would like to help him add substance to the reminder, and then he can click on the toggle to toggle this map view controller, which will essentially allow him to add the nearest location. Doing so will essentially add the task that you see here. He can click on it and then it gets presented right here. Here is where he can either complete or dismiss the task, and in doing so, the task counter will increment and it will wipe clean from the table as such. Some limitations with the applications is that you cannot add multiple locations. I wanted to keep it simplistic at the moment, and adding multiple locations I felt like would have been a little bit too cumbersome at first. I would like to see how my grandfather and other users would like to interact with the application and kind of go from there. Also, the way that the application was architected, data is only saved on the device, and this is due to core data. So this does add some limitations. Say if a user would like to share his task list to a peer, that will not be able to happen because of this limitation. Additionally, addresses cannot be searched individually. It has to be the location name or maybe a location type. That way it can intuitively look within the application. And also, only one image can be saved at the time. However, if more time was permitted for me to work on this application, I probably would have intended to add and create a login functionality so that each task list is associated to individual users. And one initial cool idea I had was that you can have the user opt in for an email report, basically a report showcasing what they did throughout the week on a weekly basis to showcase how many completed tasks they did and how many tasks they did not complete. That is probably something I could add. It seems very interesting, and I would at some point love to continue building upon this application and maybe add so. Some lessons learned. I learned the model view controller architecture, which has been very unique to this application. It helped me isolate and encapsulate different aspects of the application itself, from the business logic to the view, to the APIs, and everything else. I learned how to make API calls, which was very fun to do so, and I think it adds a really uniqueness factor to the application to add more functionality. Another great thing I learned about this was I pretty much went through a full development cycle, from planning to wireframing to the design to the actual execution of the application. And I think I learned a lot from this experience, specifically tackling tasks through small chunks and then kind of over time completing the tasks and putting everything together. I explored Swift UI, which was great. I loved that aspect of designing the application and kind of playing around with different toggle sets and different UI elements to kind of make the application my own. I learned how to manipulate core data in real time. And I learned how to incorporate Apple's MapKit framework, which was very fun to do so, and I think it was really impactful for the application experience to kind of make it both informative but also substantial to add more depth to each task. Some improvements that I do see with the class is that I wish I would have discussed more about auto layout. I think doing so would have prevented a little bit of a headache when trying to get everything structured. I also would have loved to see core data be talked about more in depth, maybe touch upon relational entities and their attributes and how you can connect the two. Another great improvement I think would have been beneficial was to enforce basically the UI standards of the latest version of iOS. I think this would have helped with the design process. That way we don't stray away from Apple's desired design language to kind of build the application. I think that would have been great. And I personally would have loved to see more utilization of iPhone hardware, such as Face ID. I think that would be a really cool form of authentication, especially if I wanted to implement my register feature for individual users, and taking into account other aspects of the iPhone. I feel like we just barely scratched the surface, and there's many capabilities that could still be utilized, such as the accelerometer. Me personally, going into development, I loved using Xcode and I loved using Swift. But over time, I also realized that there was other frameworks used for iOS development that I wish, or maybe at some point I might look at it into the future. I'm very interested in it. But there's other frameworks that could be utilized that I think it would have been nice to kind of acknowledge or maybe touch upon as an introduction for iOS development. Specifically, Xamarin, or I think that would have been my personal favorite. I've had some C# experience, and I think that would have been really great to kind of tie in with the application. Maybe at some point, I think I might actually try that, to try to convert my existing application and try to utilize that. And that has basically been my application. It was a pleasure working with this class, and it was a pleasure working with Swift and iOS. Thank you so much.